These are the new 2016 iPhones, the iPhone 7 and the iPhone 7 Plus. And whenever there is a new iPhone redesign, there has to be one thing, one small detail that people will make a gate about. So with the iPhone 4 we had the antenna gate, which was eventually fixed in the iPhone 4S, and with the iPhone 5 we had the scratch gate in which the anodization was easily coming off of the black model, and on the iPhone 6 we had the band gate, which again was eventually fixed with the iPhone 6S, and with the iPhone 7, well, what gates does the iPhone 7 have? Well, some of you might have heard of the infamous HissGate, that hissing noise that some of the iPhone 7s make under heavy load. And quite a lot of people have been complaining because of this, and it even made it on the news. So hey everyone, welcome to the Zen of Tech, I'm Daniel, and in this video I'll be covering in detail what hiss noise actually is, when does it happen, on which devices does it happen, and how to stop it if possible. So yeah, enjoy. Okay, so first off, let's talk about what a hiss noise actually is. So every single device has some sort of processing unit. In the iPhone 7's case, that's the Apple A10 Fusion chip, and every single processor, if stressed out, will make some sort of hissing noise. Now, on some processors, this noise is not that easy to hear unless you have a powerful microphone, but on others like an Intel i5 or especially an Intel i7 or Xeon processors, and also the new Apple A10 chip, you can easily hear it if you're in a really quiet environment. So what's the cause of this noise? Well, interesting enough, the CPU itself is not really the one creating the noise, but the coils on the motherboard are. So the larger the coils, the more power the CPU draws, and the louder the noise will be. So that is why it's pretty loud on a desktop processor such as the Intel i7 6700K Skylake CPU. It's also pretty loud on a laptop, but on those the CPU noise is actually masked by the fan noise. So if you're playing a game, the fan speed will be maxed out, so you won't be hearing a thing, but on the iPhones you have no fans at all, so that is why it's much easier to hear. Also, if you have a desktop with a high-end GPU, you've probably noticed this noise already. Now, usually the coils, they have a bit of glue on them to eliminate some of that noise. And on some devices, that glue has just worn off, or the amount is simply less than on others. Reason why that noise might be louder on some iPhone 7 models than on others. Okay, so number two, when does this hissing noise really happen? Well, it basically happens when you're stressing out the CPU. So when you're running CPU demanding apps, such as optimizing a project in GarageBand, running some high-end games, or when you're, for example, running some benchmarks. So the Apple A10 processor that's inside the iPhone 7, it now comes with 4 cores. So 2 high-performance ones that are used in high-demanding apps, and 2 low-performance cores which only use 1/5 of the power of the high-performance ones. And these are used for emails, messages, and the settings app. Their whole purpose is to basically maximize battery life. And Apple even designed a performance controller that decides when to switch to the high performance cores, and there's actually a pretty big difference when it comes to that hissing noise. So it's much louder when the high performance cores are being used, and again, that's because the voltage regulator that's on the motherboard, this one actually draws more power, which causes some of the coils to vibrate, and this results in that hissing noise. Number three, now that we know what a hissing noise is, that it's basically normal to happen, is it actually louder on some devices than on others? So I have quite a few iPhones right here to test out. So I have 2 iPhone 7s, 2 iPhone 7 Pluses, an iPhone 6s, an iPhone 6, an iPad mini 4, a few MacBooks as well, and of course a Samsung Galaxy S7 Edge as well. And I'm going to stress out the processor on each with some benchmarks, so let's see which is going to make the loudest hissing noise. So let's start off with the iPhone 7s. So I'm going to test this out in standby mode first. So this is the iPhone 7 in matte black. And now listen to the iPhone 7 in jet black. Yeah, the iPhone 7 in jet black is much louder. Now let's move on and do some benchmarks with Geekbench 4. So first off, the iPhone 7 matte black, this is how the hissing noise sounds. And now this is the iPhone 7 in jet black. So it's very similar on both, but again, it's a bit louder on the jet black iPhone 7. So it seems that the coils on the matte black iPhone 7 are just slightly better isolated. Now let's move on to the iPhone 7 Plus models. So starting off with standby mode first, this is the iPhone 7 Plus in matte black. And yeah, there's almost no hissing noise at all. And now here's the iPhone 7 Plus in silver, and on this one it's definitely noticeable. It's almost as loud as on the jet black iPhone 7. Now let's move on and do some benchmarks. So this is how the iPhone 7 Plus matte black sounds. And now the iPhone 7 Plus in silver. much more noticeable on both than in standby mode, but again, that hissing noise is much louder on the iPhone 7 Plus, the silver one. So same as with the iPhone 7 models, the amount of coil noise isolation seems to be very different from one model to another. So what about some other devices? Well, I've ran a Geekbench 4 on an iPhone 6s from last year, and the hissing noise was loud enough for me to hear, but definitely not as loud as any of the iPhone 7 models. Now moving on to the older iPhone 6, this is how that hissing noise sounds like. I mean, I could barely hear it. I'm not sure if you guys can hear it, but it seems like the older the devices are, the less hissing noise they make. Moving on to the iPad mini 4, this one actually comes with the Apple A8 processor that's basically the same processor that's inside the iPhone 6. It does run at a slightly higher clock speed though. And same as with the iPhone 6, the noise was almost impossible to hear, barely even noticeable. Now what about something like a Samsung Galaxy S7 Edge? So interesting enough, on my Samsung Galaxy S7 Edge, that hissing noise was even more silent than on the iPhone 6. I mean, there was one indeed, but it was almost impossible to hear. However, some people did indeed report that they did hear some hissing noise on the S7 and the S7 Edge as well. So it seems that the amount of coil isolation is indeed different from one model to another. Now moving on to some larger devices, the 12-inch MacBook for example, this one was definitely the loudest one so far in terms of coil noise, which actually makes quite a lot of sense since the Intel Core M does indeed draw more power than the mobile Apple A10 or A9 or A8 processors, even though its performance is actually weaker than the Apple A9 or the Apple A10. And finally, just for the fun of it, I'm going to test my 15-inch Retina MacBook Pro. And this is how it sounds like. Now, this is by far the loudest. However, once the fans have started kicking in, the fan noise is basically everything you could hear. And finally, what's the conclusion in all this? Well, the hissing noise, also known as the coil whine, was pretty much present in all devices. However, in some models, in some iPhone 7 models, it's slightly louder than on the others, and that's because the coils themselves are not as well isolated. So in the end, is this a big issue in the iPhone 7? Is this a real iPhone 7 gate? Well, not really, and that's because you can only hear that hissing noise when you're in a really quiet environment and when you're also running some benchmarks or when you're doing some processor intensive tasks. But yeah, there you go. Hopefully you now have a much better understanding when it comes to the iPhone 7 HissGate. Also, in case you're wondering if there's a way to fix that, well, the only way is to open up the device and actually add some extra isolation to the coils themselves. So a small drop of glue is usually used in this case. But no, I don't actually recommend you doing that, so yeah. But yeah, let me know in the comments if you've ever heard this noise before on a different device, so on a laptop, on a desktop computer, and if you ever thought it to be a serious issue. Other than that, if you have enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a huge like to let me know. It took quite a while to make, so every feedback is really appreciated. And if you've enjoyed this video, if you want to see more videos like this one, then definitely feel free to subscribe. Also, don't forget to enable notifications on my channel on web, desktop, and mobile. On mobile by simply clicking on that bell icon next to my channel so that you're notified whenever I upload a brand new epic video. But yeah, this was pretty much it for this video. Let me know in the comments if you're epic enough to make it to the end of this video. But other than that, yeah, thank you all for watching this video. I'm Daniel, and I'll see you guys in my next one. Son of Tech, signing out. Cheers.